And we're off. So happy Thursday to everyone. Welcome to another happy hour panel discussion from PTP. Excited about kicking off the new year with another edition. We had a great 2020 being able to host some of these panel discussions. Obviously, the pandemic that took place that we're in certainly changed the way that we interacted, and we had a lot of less customer meetings. And so this was a format that that our attendees seem to enjoy, which is pulling together a couple members of the team from PTP, as well as our business partners, and having some discussions around technology and technology enablement. So today we will be talking about AWS Control Tower and taking control with Control Tower and all that is. But before we get started with the discussion, I just wanted to give those of you that are on just a little information about some of the things that we've got going on at PTP. So after this is over, we'll record this event. It's being recorded right now, and we'll cut up the panel discussion into a highlight video. So kind of a fun way for us to take about an hour's worth of content and break it down into some of the highlights for 5 minutes. We'll have that up on our website. We also just released a new addition to what we call our Infinite Innovation Interview Series. This latest one was a therapeutics case study, really enabling some drug discovery and some medchem leveraging AWS Cloud for one of our life sciences customers. So that's up on our website if you want to check it out. Also, a lot going on from the LinkedIn page, and a number of you that have joined registered for our event through LinkedIn, and so thanks for connecting with us. So really appreciate everyone being a part of what's going on today, and hopefully you can find.
I think we lost Gary.
That was dramatic. I really don't know.
Of course, we lose the host. So, well, somehow he's still able to be broadcasting his slides there. So hopefully he'll be able to recover here in a moment. Well, I'll take over. And at least I'll make an assumption here that we're going to go around for introductions. So I'm Aaron Jeskey, Senior Cloud Architect here at PTP, helping in a pre-sales and engineering role with bringing customers into the AWS world. I'll bring it over to Micah. Why don't you go PTP first?
Oh, sure. Why not? I'm Micah Frederick. I'm a cloud ops architect here at PTP. I'm a AWS DevOps professional.
And introduce, it looks like everybody's popping back on from video. So maybe just do a little bit of an
order right. I didn't have the order right. I was already doing intros, Gary, and I even had your order right. I just guessed, and I got your order right.
So is it me that you couldn't hear, or was it because
we lost you? Yeah. We lost you
because I lost you. So that makes two of us.
We're on to Micah's introduction. So we actually I have not seen this deck, but we have this wonderful telepathy. So Micah's doing his introduction, and we'll come back around to.
Perfect.
So Micah, kick it off. Sorry.
Oh, so Micah Frederick with PTP. I'm a cloud ops architect, AWS professional. I've been doing DevOps probably for about a decade now, a little bit longer than they had a term for it, I think. So a lot of automation and different work.
Great.
Yeah, so I'm Chris. I'm with AWS. I'm in my second year now at AWS. I've got a similar background. I've been doing containers, DevOps, build pipelines, and since pretty much since Docker started, I've been working with containers and all kinds of traditional and hybrid architecture. So right now I'm Ingram Micro is my customer, and I'm focused on their technical enablement. So Babu, you want to?
Yep. Hi, this is Babu Srinvasan, Partner Solutions Architect with AWS. My focus area is around well-architected in helping customers move to cloud, architect their applications for high availability and highly secure on the AWS cloud for the last 6 years.
Thank you. Harold.
Bhatkoti, Ingram Micro, working as a solution architect, helping customer with deployment and architect and planning, mainly lifecycle services. Been doing on-prem a lot for the first 10 years of my career, and last 8 or 9 years public cloud, mainly AWS. And yeah, very looking forward for this discussion today.
Fantastic. Go ahead and stop sharing and just get to the discussion. So thanks for the panelists, for you guys participating and picking up my slack when I thought you were gone and you thought I was gone. We'll see how the recording treats that and see who was actually right through the WebEx technology. But somebody wasn't there. So anyway, again, thanks, and thanks to all of our attendees for being part of this. So let's go ahead and dive in to the discussion. And just for everybody that's on with us, usually we'll start a little general, have some discussions about, you know, the what and the whys, and slowly get a little bit deeper into the technology that we're discussing. And so also for attendees, if you've got any questions, feel free to just post those for the chat. It's easiest for us if you can just post those on chat, and then I can ask them to the panelists. So with that, Aaron, I will start with you, and again, high level. So AWS Control Tower, what is it? Why should organizations be considering it?
Great. Well, yeah, so thank you. So the AWS Control Tower, I guess, is you think I would know, I have a really slick one here to put together for you after describing it 3 times to the customers today. Sorry. The Control Tower is really a guidance model and a governance model for you to help overlay on all your AWS accounts. It uses a number of AWS native tools and orchestrates the ability to control your users, what they have access to, how they access things, and just give you a centralized location to manage the your organization and all of your sub accounts inside of that.
Yeah, so just you know, we have organizations, right, which was one of our first attempts at an answer to a multi-account strategy. But Control Tower really just takes that to the next level, and it provides, you know, a lot of well-architected framework that just enhances organization and provides a much more secure and you know, ready to go environment, landing zone sort of thing.
Gotcha. No, so that's nice. So we're talking governance, we're talking control. My assumption is, you know, probably continues to become even more important in larger, more dynamic organizations, lots of accounts, things of that nature. Is that accurate, Aaron?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So as you know, a customer will often start off with just that single account to go, and they'll dump everything inside of it. But as you go and develop, start to expand your infrastructure and start to adopt more of the well-architected framework, you're going to move into an organization structure along with having a lot of sub-accounts. So you end up with an environment where you're dealing with, depending on what your choice is, a lot of customers that we guide on this journey, we push for them to have an account per application or per business unit, and then again going down on that, it's having it be part of your SDLC, meaning that you're going to have a production account for your finance app. You're going to have a development account for your finance app to really keep that blast radius of your accounts as tight as you possibly can. So when you start to face that many accounts, ensuring that you're following all of your internally agreed upon standards, as well as any regulations or frameworks that you might be held to by your customers or your industry, you want to ensure that you are rolling out and keeping that standardization across all your accounts. Control Tower helps you very easily create that, maintain it.
Yeah, I like that dev test production type, concept. That helps even the smallest organizations. You know, even those large enterprises that don't necessarily have dozens of applications and teams, you might just be a two-person, shop, and you do have dev, test, and production, and just managing, role access across all of them, shared services between all of them, managing the roles and all of that stuff. Control Tower takes a lot of that heavy lifting off of your plate. So if you are that two-person shop and you don't have the capacity to manage all of that overhead, Control Tower will give you defaults out of the box, which will work for a lot of small organizations as well.
Awesome. So I think that's a great start, I think, in terms of, the what it is and why. And maybe from here, Chris, let you and Babu kind of go into maybe some of the key features, the components of that, and really what drives that control and what drives some of that governance.
Sure. Yeah. So it's definitely built on organizations. So by default, you get the org structures that you're already familiar with, AWS organizations, that if you have multiple accounts, you probably are already using it. It leverages the service control policies, which is built into that, which allow you to set up guardrails around those accounts. So you could have an org unit with a set of policies that prevents certain behavior within that org that's allowed in another org, and it could be access to certain types of instances and things like that. And in organizations, that's available, and you have to manage it manually. And out of the box, you don't really have that turned on. But with Control Tower, out of the box, you get those guardrails, and you get two different types of guardrails. You get preventative guardrails and detective guardrails. And the difference between those two would be, with preventative, you're prevented from taking that action. And that could be something like having publicly accessible S3 buckets. That might be a rule that you implement. The other type of guardrail, the detective, are going to allow you to take that action, but they're going to give you an alert when that happens. So you might want to just be a little bit more permissive, and then so that your developers, for example, can go off and start creating services and experiment. But if they're starting to do something that violates your InfoSec policy, that'll show up in Control Tower, and then you can go and talk to that developer. And then at that point, you can make the decision, do we want to change that guardrail, or do we want to go and remediate that? And that remediation is also built into Control Tower. So you can build Lambda functions that can respond to those detective events. So when you detect that an EC2 instance was launched of the wrong type, maybe it's too expensive, or it doesn't meet the rules that you create in the beginning, you can actually have a Lambda function out there that will go and shut those instances down for you, or reapply your policies. So those are just some of the core. There's also Account Factory, which will help you provision new accounts if you've got a large organization and you want to enable some experimentation. That's one of my favorite use cases. So I'm probably going to talk about experimentation a lot.
Awesome.
But you do want to give them the ability to get easy access to accounts, instead of having to go through a ticketing process and then making sure it's added to the organization in the right spot. You can set all of that up through Service Catalog, and it'll launch the accounts into the right organization with the right control guardrails in place.
So when I hear guardrails, I think a lot about data security. So I'm sure it's part of it, but it expands to guardrails are also just control and manageability as well. Is that accurate?
Yep. Yeah, and the cost could be one of those things, which isn't really a security issue, but you might decide that you don't want any large instances to be created, or maybe your developers can only launch secure instances. So you could have your developer org and say that they're only allowed to launch those types of instances.
And then the difference between preventative and detective. So I'm going back to like my data security days and thinking about data loss prevention, DLP technology, and you can say, hey, this is permitted, but I'm going to alert on it. Kind of almost like an IDS versus an IPS, and versus, hey, we're not going to allow this. I'm not going to allow data from this particular device to get to a USB drive or something like that. And so similar types of guardrails here. There's things detective that we can say, hey, we just want to know about. We're not going to stop that behavior. But the preventative is it's got to fit within these parameters, or it can't be done. So if you've got strict compliance, requirements or things like that, you can ensure that your environment fits in that world. Is that an accurate representation?
Yeah. So you may just disable any activity in a certain region, or a certain service. You know, if you want to have a strong rule, you can implement that as a preventative. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So Harold, and I don't know if we got to this in the beginning, but Harold's our Australia representative. So we've got the world spanned here between West Coast and middle US and East Coast in Australia. But thanks for getting up early with us this morning. You know, I know a lot of people understand landing zones, and now we've got Control Tower. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between Control Tower and landing zones that people may have in place today?
Yeah, sure. So the way I see it, if we want any security in cloud, so security by default, there are these two tools that we have in AWS these days. One is a landing zone, which is, think of the open source software. And the other one is a new Control Tower, which is kind of, it's like a branded out of open source. So the landing zone is a service provided by AWS. It's just a template that customer can use and easily deploy and secure the cloud environment by default. When I say cloud environment by default, when you're building a house, you need to make sure that all the pillars are strong and can cope the burden of the multiple stories of the building. So if we don't think that way, security by default, cloud is everything is on the public domain. So it's a lot of companies have issue with moving towards the cloud. So that actually is not a good solution when it comes to the migration, that people are thinking it's unsecure. So to get people on the same page, it's the tool that ensures that there is a governance. It's a highly regulated security by default. So these are the two tools in the security guys arsenal to deploy either control zone, control tower, or the landing zone. So as I said, from our experience, mostly SMEs, they tend to choose control tower because it's a templated, few buttons click on, and it's all done. And then on the other hand, if we talk about the landing zone, it's highly customizable. You do need an on-prem team or a dedicated resource who can actually have a coding background, can do the highly customizable. So mostly like software houses, banks, they tend to go for the landing zone because it gives high level of customization and CI/CD pipeline type of things. On the other hand, because Control Tower is a very secure and managed services from AWS, it gives less customizable features.
So then is it a choice that organizations make? It's one or the other, or are there times that both those tools are used in play?
Well, the choice would be based on if you got a resource to manage it, go for the landing zone. If you want to do the highly customizable solution, such as bank and software houses, they want to give access to the customer on the certain shared resources and only do the isolation between the different services. So they tend to go for the landing zone, highly customizable. And Control Tower is just for the SMEs, small and medium enterprises. It's out of the box, everything done for you, few clicks, deployed, and in action. Security by default is turned on.
So the landing zone is more of a pattern than anything, and there's two implementations of that pattern. One is that consulting engagement where we have reference architectures available on how you can implement a landing zone. And a lot of times, we'll have partners that go out and consult and help customers deploy that landing zone pattern within their environment. And they'll use the same services that Control Tower uses, AWS Config and organizations and things like that, where Control Tower is one implementation of landing zones that's managed and provided by AWS, and it uses those same services. So it's if you don't have a lot of custom needs, and you want to just get going quick, and you're maybe a smaller shop, I think Control Tower is a great option to get started pretty quickly with that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Super, really helpful. So let's go to Micah. So Micah, you live, like a lot of us, you wear a number of hats, but you're working in data security on a day-to-day basis. So I know Chris alluded to from the preventative and detective aspects of Control Tower, but maybe if you could dive just a little bit deeper in how you see data security being enhanced with a Control Tower deployment.
So your guardrails are like one of your big things kind of right out the gate. It prevents you from having to like create a lot of your own service control policies. So those are pretty easy ways to set that up. Part of the other couple big things that Control Tower kind of puts in as for data security or governance are your audit accounts and your logging accounts. So by default, when Control Tower launches and you launch accounts through Control Tower, it sets up CloudTrail logs and it sets up AWS config into all those regions and all those sub accounts. And then it creates all the buckets and all the transfer of interconnecting between the accounts to move all of your log files into one account, and then to move all that config data to be able to be seen in one account, which is your audit. So it gives you a really central place to look at your entire AWS organization from like a governance and a compliance perspective. You don't have to be going into every single account to always be looking at all of your logs. Those logs get moved up into one place, and then that account can be restricted so that you're not allowing everyone from your organization in there. You can keep that to your auditors, you can keep that to very specific groups of people. Then your guardrails that Chris talked about earlier prevent people from messing with that particular pipeline of data. So by default, those are sort of mandatory guardrails that Control Tower puts in place. It basically says you can't turn off CloudTrail, you can't delete the bucket, you can't, basically can't do anything that would stop us from logging and collecting all that data. So those are kind of big with the governance. Security was also up with all security. Some of the other security things you get, like the guardrails are your biggest, most obvious things. You get the guardrails put in there, the detective and the preventative. That really lets you kind of see what's going on and stop stuff. A lot of those are done via AWS config. Some of them are done by service control policies. Basically, some of the detective ones are done by AWS config, so it allows you to start getting into the auto remediation that Chris was talking about through Lambda functions and things like that. So those are probably the big ones. You also get your single sign-ons and your AI roles that you don't have to manage in individual accounts. You start centralizing all of that kind of role and access management into Control Tower, or really into single sign-on from an organizational level. And then that just prevents, you trying to manage users and roles across multiple accounts and quickly lose track of passwords and keys and everything else. So this really centralizes all that and gives it a much easier place for your security engineers to kind of to work and look at.
Right. Just to add to that, right, one of the compliance requirement is the security information and event management called SIEM. AWS has a service called AWS Security Hub that kind of centralizes many of the monitoring and compliance monitoring requirements. So when you bring AWS Security Hub and AWS Control Tower together, you can simplify the overall enablement compliance monitoring solution, as well as remove some of the operational burden. So this is one of the aspects of the operational excellence within the well-architected and can be easily implemented with Control Tower integrating with AWS Security Hub.
That's great.
I like that tie-in with well-architected because, like out of the box, Control Tower provides you with a well-architected multi-account structure. And it's not that you don't have to go through that well-architected process after you've launched your services and things like that, but you do have a foundation. that helps with that.
Good discussion.
Yeah, I mean, the other probably thing, just while we're on like that security, Chris kind of alluded to it before. By using Account Factory and Control Tower, you get much more in that better habit of when you want to do experimentation, you want to do new things, spin up new accounts. Keep all that separate from your production loads, from your standard testing and staging procedures. It just starts reinforcing better habits about how you should work with new technologies or to do experimentation or to test a new product or whatever, instead of trying to I'll just piggyback on production equipment to try to do this. And inevitably that never ends well. I mean,
and I think, sorry.
I was just going to say, I like what you mentioned about the log accounts and the audit accounts. Those are in that core OU, and the guardrails that protect those, they're not optional. You can't turn those off. So a lot of people are motivated to sort of deploy services into those accounts, maybe because it's easy and they have direct access to those logs, for example. But that, that's not going to be possible. You will have to export those and share those with another a shared services OU maybe that operates a different set, because of those tight controls over the log and audit group.
Yeah, I was going to expand on a little bit of when you start to go into that, when you start to develop those habits of experimenting in isolation where you're not going to be impacting even other dev instances, redeploy only the parts of dev you need and go break inside of there, because development may be development to your operations team, but development is production to your developers. So move that off to the side, do it in its own place. But as you start to do that, you might find that your service catalog or some other part of config is pushing down some restrictions that are holding you back from achieving the goals that you want to have or that you're trying to aim for with this new development effort. So you have the concept of OUs as well inside of Control Tower, so you're not just stuck with these rules being forced across all of your accounts. You can have these guardrails being applied to certain guardrails being applied to certain subsets of your accounts. Chris, I think you had a pretty good description, or I'll leave it to anybody on the panel here that might know a little bit more about or have a better description of using OUs to create that kind of deployment method.
Yeah, I mean, I leave that entirely up to the partner and customer. I mean, if you want to build those around either your organization, you might have a marketing one and they're going to have access to certain data and tooling. You might have, your dev, test, and prod, and then everybody within those. It all depends on the size of the org and how you operate your business and how you draw those boxes around. But it does make a lot of sense, and we do recommend up front that you put thought into how you want to, draw those boxes around your organization and your processes, and your structure should, mirror that in Control Tower.
So I know we've kind of started to get in, Aaron. I was going to come to you and talk about, some best practices, if you will, in setting up Control Tower. I know it sounds like we've had some conversation around the building out the guardrails and some of the policies and things like that. Are there any other things that come to mind that, maybe we haven't talked about so far today that, you've had experience working with customers that say, hey, when deploying, these are some things you really want to pay attention to?
Yeah, I want to add on one part or repeat one part that I've already said, because I find it to be really important. And Chris just highlighted the need, talk to your customer, and that means, from a managed services side or even internally, your business customers, about how they want to be managed and how, what level of detail they want to get into. So knowing in advance, are you going to be an organization that says, we're just going to consider everything production to go into this one account, or you're going to break it down to business unit, you're going to break it down to per application. Knowing that and how you want to slice up your SDLC for your accounts is extremely important, because that's going to dictate things like when you start to make the decision of maybe bringing in a data lake. How do you want to go deploy that using lake formation, which is a whole other conversation, but using that using tools like that work well with Control Tower, but really dictate how much management you're going to put in, how much management effort you're going to put in up front. So really know how you want your application to look, and then stick with that pattern as best you possibly can. Obviously, things change. The nice thing about Control Tower, it is flexible, but nobody likes to go back and do duplicative work. Other areas of focus are find out, work with your business on any kind of contracts or regulation or security frameworks that you're held to. Know those up front. Use Security Hub is a great tool. There are some other. We partner with CloudCheckr to help out with some of that. It's not specifically to a component of Control Tower, but bringing those tools really help you define early on, or help define early on how you're going to roll out your security model. Understanding what kind of access rights you want your users, the people that are actually going to be participating. Bring in an SSO provider, make sure that people aren't having to use root credentials to access the accounts, always a nice thing. Make sure that you're going in and defining roles and policies, thinking about those types of controls you want to put in place and rolling them out through Control Tower, through config, and pushing them down to your sub accounts. You'll feel like it might feel a little heavy at first, but that first time somebody in your business comes to you and says, hey, I've got a new application that's going to work with this application we already have existing. Can I have a playground to go, just to see what happens? And you click a few buttons, that account gets provisioned to that end user. They're able to do all the things that they want. And you hear a couple of days later that they accidentally deleted a database and would have absolutely been completely destructive to your other development environment. You'll realize the benefits of taking the time to think about these things up front.
We call that a career limiting move.
Yes, definitely a CLE. Yes, exactly. The Control Tower helps limit the number of career limiting events you'll experience in AWS.
And I'd like to just plug well-architected, that framework, going through a well-architected review will uncover a lot of those things that you just brought up, and help you think through them. It's really hard for any of us to know all of those things and keep all of those things in our heads all the time. So that framework and the questions in the tool will help guide you through to make sure you're considering all that stuff.
Amen.
The one other thing I was going to throw in, we talked about considerations and setting up. So mostly we seem like we've talked about like almost new accounts, but there is an issue of bringing in existing accounts into Control Tower. So one of those considerations that you can look at in there is like AWS has released these like conformance packs through AWS config that you can actually set up in an existing account that will basically apply guardrails, but not really apply guardrails, but will tell you if your account is going to get totally beat up by guardrails that go in place when you move it into Control Tower, or whether you're already good. So that's pretty useful if you've got especially if you've got a big legacy account and you want to move that under Control Tower. It's kind of a good step to run that, get that conformance pack set up, and then you can make your changes into that account or how you're using it before you try to just pull it under Control Tower and then have a career limiting move.
That's right. No, thanks for adding on to that, because that is certainly a large portion, I think, of where our customers is dealing with the existing accounts. Since you're talking, Micah, and we were just talking, Aaron was talking about some of the best practices, and he alluded to SSO, and I know you spent a lot of time working with some of our customers and implementing single sign-on. Maybe just talk about how single sign-on is or should be a part of Control Tower, and why that's important, and then how it gets deployed. I think that would be great for our audience.
So single sign-on is pretty much just a default part of kind of what Control Tower uses. This is how Control Tower manages its kind of accounts. It is the way that they would suggest you sign on to accounts, especially as you get into Control Tower. You could argue it's probably just the way Amazon's going to recommend you connect to accounts, period. Kind of especially as you get into the organizations, it provides a central place to create roles, to create permission sets, and you can map those permission sets to, those groups with permission sets to different accounts across your organization. And then you no longer have to keep doing this every time you set up a new account. You don't have to keep setting up new roles. You can just say, yep, I want these groups to have permissions to these new accounts. Like I want to add these 3 groups to this account, or I want to add this account to these existing groups. And then from there, you can either use just, just a built-in like Amazon database of just, you just create usernames and passwords straight in Amazon and it acts as your identity provider. Or the way most companies use it and how we've kind of seen it mostly is you create that SAML connection with an external identity provider, such as like an Office 365, an Okta. There's like 4 or 5 of them that are out of the box kind of set up to work really well with single sign-on, and I think more probably coming as they as more of them kind of embrace that SCIM like automation for provisioning.
Got it. Okay. So we did have a question. Before I move on to some of the other thoughts that I had, we did have a question from an audience member, and it's really kind of alluding to Control Tower and the number of accounts, and the question being, what's the financial impact of using more accounts with Control Tower? Anybody, I know that anybody want to field that or just give some thought to that question?
I think it's like $28.50, something like that. I believe it is just shy of $30 when you roll out the initial deployment of it. So there's very unless it's a personal account, like you might have one T2 Nano running your little Bastion host out there, you're not going to notice it.
Yeah, and the cost really comes from the underlying services, like the config rules, the number of config rules that you have applied. So and storage and all the underlying services. There's not really a charge to Control Tower itself, but again, just launching it, you're gonna create those config rules and things like that.
And those config rules and that storage would be something that you would be accruing some of that charge if you hadn't used Control Tower. Anyways, you would have those Lambda functions, you have that Control Tower rules running in these sub accounts to ensure that they're adhered to. Your logs and whatnot would be showing up there. So I kind of look at it as it's a pretty flat, almost dead flat increase to your bill.
Okay, super. Now that's crystal clear. It's like pressing the easy button.
Doing logging and auditing right, you really shouldn't see a cost increase much at all. If you've never done any auditing or logging, then yeah, you're going to be turning on some services that you haven't probably seen in the past, but it's a pretty good idea to turn those on anyway.
You probably should have seen it in the past.
Yeah.
Okay, super. So then I'll keep my eyes out for any other questions that come up. In the meantime, I've got a couple questions before, again, this hour always goes by a lot. We're 3/4 of the way through it. I got a couple questions, and then we'll open it up to some final thoughts from the group. But one of them is going to be in and around just like examples and case studies. But also, every one of us on the call today really is representing, the partner ecosystem of AWS. Chris and Babu are representing, supporting Ingram. We've got Harold that's Ingram that's kind of in the distribution model. And then obviously those of us from PTP as an advanced consulting partner and a life sciences competency organization. So we're all kind of built around, being able to take and leverage the AWS technologies, the services, the solutions, and help enable our customers to do more and better things faster, but with the guardrails and with the control. And so I thought, Harold, maybe it would be a good question for you, just in your role with Ingram and working with organizations like PTP and considering, technologies across the AWS spectrum. How do you see your role working in this ecosystem, as a architect for Ingram, and how do you see helping us and helping organizations deploy technologies like Cloud Checker? Maybe just a little bit of the day in the life.
Yeah, sure. Great question. So actually, there's a couple of ways we can get involved with you guys. One is if you just need a little bit of you run out of the your current work power, we can provide you additional hand on your ongoing projects. That's one way, just helping hand here and there. The other way is you can engage Ingram to deploy the whole control tower and as a end-to-end project. So when I say end-to-end project, we can be just like your hands and feet, working part of your team, delivering the project for the end customer. So take an example. Once you get engaged, we will be doing the discovery and assessment. So that means assessing your current customers' on-prem environment, working out what are the current controls to build a secure environment in AWS. Then do a lot of engagement with you guys and a customer with architecting the platform. Maybe some workload need to rehost, some workload needs to be replicated, replatformed, and once we agree with that, based on the discussion, we will go, okay, yes, it's a control tower, or it's a the control tower is a good candidate for this. We will just run a POC, and based on the POC outcome, we will then start progressing further with the project. So once we know that POC of this particular authentication system with the additional integration with third parties such as ADs and things like that went well in POC, then we proceed for the further phase of the migration.
Makes sense.
I'd like to elaborate on some of that. In the past year, we've done a lot of great work with Ingram Micro, and they're in the process now of helping activity with a very large migration. They just stood up a landing zone. You can see the case study online if you search for it, and they're really specializing in migrations now. So if you need support, if you don't have the bench to do it, they're ready to help with all aspects of that. And another area that they're just launching a package offer on Monday on is around well-architected reviews. So if you want support doing those well-architected reviews or working off those HRIs, there's a program out there built for it that you should see on Monday.
Yeah, and that's great. And so, I mean, from an organization like us, what we, for partners like PTP, as a consulting partner of AWS, we've got usually a narrow focus in the vertical or the specialty that we focus on. We understand our customers really well, their needs. The relationship with us, with Ingram, is an opportunity to scale. And so if there are, solutions that are outside, there is not one organization that is an expert on everything that's going on in AWS. It's too broad, it's moving too fast. So, we leverage a relationship with Ingram to help us scale so that we can deliver a full solution back to our customers. And so, team supporting Ingram, that's how this whole thing works really effectively and allows us to take our expertise of customer situation, their business, and then deliver a full solution. So Harold, thanks for taking that question, obviously, and Chris for adding on to that.
Yeah, well said. I mean, to me, that plays into that undifferentiated heavy lifting, which is a core message of ours. Your differentiation is your vertical, your customer base and where you want to specialize, and you can offload that undifferentiated heavy lifting to either AWS, through one mechanism, or to Ingram Micro, and that's what I like the most about this distribution channel.
Yep,
so.
No question. Super.
And just to add on that, like we got a global presence, so you may have a customer in South America or North America. And if you need customer to deploy worldwide, AWS is everywhere, right? Everywhere, and so is Ingram Micro. So you guys can really fill the gap between your team and your current projects. How do you want to scale? And really, with that model, you can scale very quickly.
Scaling's important. It's amazing how fast you get to some really large dynamic deployments, and you certainly need help. So. Fantastic. So want to maybe close with, I think it's always good to put some perspective to this, and AWS famously leverages case studies and ask partners to leverage case studies, et cetera. But they're very helpful in being able to paint a picture of how said technology service solution delivered ultimate value. So, Chris, maybe I thought for you, your involvement with Control Tower and working with a customer, maybe just an example or two, or best you can, and maybe just describe that a use case that may be helpful to illustrate that for our audience.
Sure. Yeah, I have a couple of things I want to talk about, but in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on the second one. So I've got a customer story that talks about SMB customer that is using it, but really the focus of that was the peace of mind that this SMB customer got. And we're focusing on building out right now an architecture, which is, you can think of it like our marketplace, our click to run and things like that, but it incorporates Control Tower. So you get, and the idea is to enable SMB customers, give them the peace of mind and a platform to build packaged offers and to build their AWS practice, and do that in a way where there may be two customers, two people at a customer site, and they don't have the capacity to manage all of the overhead that's required, like I mentioned earlier in the talk. And at the same time, the partners that are supporting those customers, be it you or Ingram Micro, when you start to get into the SMB market, you're managing dozens or hundreds of customers at once. And you are also typically, the SMB focused partners tend to be SMBs themselves. So scaling out to hundreds of partners to make sure they're all well architected and they're all protecting, and cost optimized and things like that, that's a challenge for you as well. And Control Tower can help take some of that heavy lifting off of your plate. Knowing that that's deployed, you get that strong foundation. And one of the central features of Control Tower, which we didn't talk about much, is that service catalog. So the idea is that the pattern, these Control Towers base, you build out your architecture, and that could be anything from workspaces to a little bit of storage, backup solution, other third-party solution, and you build out one template of that, one product description. You deploy that into your service catalog, and then your other partners or customers can go into service catalog, browse those solutions, and launch that into the appropriate organizational unit. And then at that point, they'll have all the right guardrails applied. So even for a small business customer, this can be, a self-service way for them to deploy new solutions into their own environment with very low touch and very low requirements on support. So I'm excited to get this architecture launched and socialized.
Deal, that's great. Anybody else? Any stories?
We're gonna have dinner in a little while. It's half hour before dinner. If you need something, have a drink or something.
AJ.
Sorry, I've got
modern times.
Snack. That's what you have to do.
No, sorry,
it's only 30 minutes before dinner.
Oh, geez, sorry about that.
I've heard that growing up 1,000 times.
I
No
thought
Twinkies. No
sorry.
Twinkies. Eat an apple. No problem. No problem. It happens. So thought that was a great example. Anybody have either another case study or any parting shots? We got about 5 minutes left before the top of the hour. If there's anything that we missed that you wanted to share, either notes that you had, an example, or maybe a customer situation you thought was relevant. Anybody have anything before we let everyone go?
Yeah, Harold, yeah. So one common question that we see from the partners or our customers is, why do we go for Control Tower? Or it's very generic question that we see maybe hundreds of times. Why do we go for Control Tower or the landing zone? Do we really need it? If I can go to the AWS GUI and do all the IAM stuff I want to do. So I think the large organization and medium size, they look for the, as Chris said, service catalog. It's a killer feature that people don't understand that, right? coming from a small shop to the medium, they're still implementing the things and asking this type of questions that, how do we do, why do we need it's additional burden? If I can, all I want to do is log into the portal and fire up. So yes, you can do that, customize. Nobody is saying don't do that. It's, as long as you follow the best practice. But if you want to do something like security by default, that has to be like from day one, a strong foundation. And these two tools exactly designed to do that. So maybe somebody else can shed some light on that. This is the question, if you see it coming from the customer as well, or is it just me?
No, I get similar sort of feedback, and what we're seeing with these click to run solutions based on Control Tower are, we're getting a lot of interest in it because of that. You can have a branded page that has your own customer logo and things like that on there, and with one click and a little bit of work, you get a deployed solution, maybe even into a new account, and people get really excited about that. I think it's going to be a big year for that sort of solution.
Yep. Especially for multi-tenancy, if you got a rinse and repeat type of template, of course you can do with CloudFormation, but that doesn't go into the multiple accounts and multiple tenants. So let's say we are a software house and we want to deploy like one-click solution to deploy for a customer X, and then same thing for customer rinse and repeat type of situation. These tools provide great flexible catalog feature. Just catalog and you are onboarding customer, and then you're doing, it's just cost is dramatically reduced into the half.
So you've got larger organization, you've got lots of business lines or perhaps inside, and you can create that same structure for them, et cetera, through that catalog that all meets your requirements. And that makes again, simplifying the control. That's, I think, you think back to 10, 15 years ago, the hardest thing with large, dynamic, complex environments is establishing the controls that you want without making the deployment of a server take 2 weeks, those kinds of things. And so, these are great tools that, deploy at the speed of the cloud, but have the control that you want. So that's a great point, Harold, and thanks for bringing that up.
2 weeks is conservative in a lot of orgs.
Right.
One of my favorite examples, I was trying to launch an Elasticsearch based solution, and this is for centralized logging at a large retailer, and we didn't have centralized logging. So if we had an operational event, somebody somewhere in the world would have to go and log into one of our 6,000 stores at that point and figure out what was wrong and hope that the log files were still there and that we didn't run out of disk space or whatever else, right? So I proposed Elasticsearch, and I got buy-in all the way up to the CIO, and he said, yes, let's go for it. I love your plan. Let's go for it. It took me 6 months to get a couple of servers for an experiment. 6 months. Because even though I had his buy-in, I had to go and get buy-in from InfoSec, and then I had to get buy-in from every other group just to get the experimentation platform. Ultimately, I had it running under a server on under my desk, but that's not a secure, well-architected solution by any means.
And now you think about, okay, we can do that all up front. I wish all those guardrails at the beginning, and then everything else just flows as long as they conform to policies.
You could say my developing group has a budget of $500 a month, and they can launch as many instances as they want, under a certain tier of instance, and that would have been plenty for me to get up and running within days. That's the sort of thing I like to think about with Control Tower. That vending machine, just be able to get moving as fast as that engineer at 2 a.m. has an idea they want to test. They don't have to wait till the next day to talk to somebody to try to get a server even. They just go and launch it, and it's already controlled and secure.
Yeah. In December, we did a panel discussion like this around running a cloud center of excellence in organizations. And so that was all, accountability and responsibility and framework within an organization for decision-making. Now that I honestly, I didn't think about that until you started saying what you were saying today. And it's like, wow, so that is, teaming and process and people. And this is a tool to be able to implement the things that a cloud center of excellence can determine. These are our rules. and now we can control with tools like this. So it's a really, I think, a really helpful way for me to think about it, for sure, and how you kind of manage the compliance and the rules and the structure and the guardrails through an organization. Great. Fantastic discussion today. Really appreciate it. Before we close out, anything else that we may have missed before we let everybody go?
No, I want to thank you though for your partnership and for the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite subjects. So thanks for everybody.
You bet. Thank you guys. Appreciate everybody for their participation. Great content for our attendees. Like we said, we'll take this recording. Ultimately, it'll get posted up after approvals, and then we'll cut it down to a highlight video. So those people that are time constrained, that don't have 60 minutes, hopefully they can get a lot of the goodness in about 5 or 6 minutes from some of the excerpts from today. So anyway, thank you all. Have a great afternoon to everybody at Herald. Herald, have a great morning. And we'll talk with you soon. Thanks to the attendees for participating. Take care.
Thanks, guys.